Welcome everyone to 4 at 4 Forums. We are live on Facebook and live on YouTube. Today's program is starring guest host Willow Bay, Dean of the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism at USC, and one of America's most beloved broadcasters. And now, here's Willow.
Thank you, Gary, and welcome everyone to 4 on 4, the economics of podcasting. The business has seen explosive growth, is attracting viewers and creators, and with them, big players, distributors, producers like Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and more. And it's experiencing a resurgence or new growth during the pandemic. 18% of adults said they're listening to more podcasts since they started isolating and social distancing. So today we're going to continue a conversation we started with this group a few weeks ago. We're going to consider the financial future of the podcast industry. What are critical factors to creating a business that is profitable and ethically and equitably sustainable, profitable for everyone, creators, producers, distributors, marketers, along with delivering value to an audience. We'll look at the role of gatekeepers and disruptors, and also consider the way in which Gen Z might make its mark on the business. One of the areas that I'd really like to explore with this incredible panel today is how this business will both reflect and be shaped by Gen Z as both consumers and as a talent pipeline. We know they're listening. 1 in 2 podcast listeners are between the ages of 12 and 34. So Gen Z and millennials make up half the audience. We have an incredible panel of experts. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves right now. And maybe Joe Garner, I'll start with you. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Willow. Nice to be with you. As you said, my name is Joe Garner. I'm author. I've been in broadcasting almost all of my adult life. So that detour into publishing brought me into storytelling. And podcasting was just a natural extension. And so I also develop and produce and help others, brands and personalities, develop podcasts as well.
Thanks, Joe. Joe Ferullo, let's go to you.
Hey, Willow, how are you? My name is Joe as well. I was an executive vice president of programming at CBS. Before that, I worked at NBC and ABC, so I've covered the waterfront when it comes to the networks. At CBS, a lot of my focus was moving traditional shows into digital media and new media, including trying to figure out how podcasting fit into the mix. So happy to talk about that today.
Great. And Nicholas D'Augusto?
Hi. Thanks, Willow. Yeah, my name is Nicholas D'Augusto, and I'm a professional television and film actor. You may have seen me in shows like Masters of Sex, Gotham, The Office, Trial and Error, where I was opposite John Lithgow and Kristen Chenoweth. I've been in a couple of movies, Final Destination 5, Fired Up. I have a podcast called God and Other Delicacies, where I talk about God, belief, non-belief, and other delicate subject matter. And that's what I'll be talking about today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicholas. And we'll have Jane Wells joining us from the road. She's filed a dispatch from Las Vegas, where she's reporting today. And I'm Willow Bay, as Gary mentioned, Dean of the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. Normally, I would be joining you from our state-of-the-art media center, which is typically filled on a late afternoon like this with students across all our programs in comm, public relations, and journalism. But I can report that even with campus closed to in-person learning, audio, as we call it, including podcast, is thriving. I brought some images to share. So Gary, if you want to share those with our audience, I can just talk a little bit about the perspective of podcasting from an academic lens. We've always had a robust radio program, both student-produced programs and curriculum. And as I mentioned, now it's called audio. And it happens to be a required component of both our undergraduate and our master's programs in journalism, because our faculty understood early on that podcasting in particular requires journalistic training and technical skills. We're also just about to finalize a podcasting minor. And Nicholas, this might be relevant to you because we're collaborating with the School of Cinematic Arts and the School of Performing Arts to put together an undergraduate minor, which coordinates faculty and curriculum across those different disciplines. we've seen students embrace podcasts as a platform for journalistic storytelling, for bringing to life critical stories, and for highlighting critical voices that we may not have heard from before. Students have quite literally fallen in love with audio. We have several student podcasts in addition to our radio broadcasts that we do every day. A bunch of them in sports, like the Knockout Round. We'll have a conversation series with guests. They've used them to take on tough subjects and timely and important issues, like one focusing on the pandemic from a student's perspective, called Portraits of a Pandemic, or issues of mental health. Faculty also produce podcasts across the university. You saw a couple of them in those images that I shared. And I will tell you that students are most often their producers. They're the ones with the technical know-how. And they're also displaying, incredible ingenuity in covering stories while working from home, while social distancing. Take a look at this one story from Isaac Murtaugh, who's a journalism major, a radio reporter, and a podcaster.
Hi, my name is Isaiah Murtaugh. I'm a reporter, host, and producer at Annenberg Radio in the Media Center. Welcome to our recording studio. So we've got the blanket over the entrance to deaden the sound. Closets are great because they are with clothes, and if you talk into clothes, you can't hear anything. No echo, none at all. Zero echo, absolutely none, totally soundproofed. And then Sebastian brought me a special sound box to put our wonderful microphone. And if I put it on the shelf, it's exactly at my mouth height, which is so cool. Normally what we do is 2 shows a week, half an hour. We air live from the Media Center. Obviously, it's not an option anymore. So we air 1 or 2 stories that we post on the website every day. And then we've been working on a big hour-long pandemic special. And it's just been incredible, actually. This is one of the biggest moments we're ever going to face. And it's an opportunity to report, to do interesting work, to make interesting stories. And we're doing it.
Joe Ferullo, I don't know about you, but whenever I see that foam on the wall, it takes me back to the old broadcasting days when invariably some closet somewhere was turned into an audio recording booth. So while all of that is great from a storytelling perspective, I have to admit, we don't have a monetization plan for our students, but I think before we get into the economics of the business, it would be great to ask you all what you think about the values to both creators and consumers alike using this platform to tell meaningful stories and to touch audiences. And, I might start with Nicholas, because your God and Other Delicacies certainly does that and is has allowed you to follow a passion in storytelling and connecting with audiences. So what has the value been to you?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. By the way, I think that video is exceptional, and I'm excited for all those students and their opportunities. I would have loved to have had that access as a young student myself. I think it's really, really good. I think one thing, so I can speak about this from multiple directions, but I think one thing I want to jump on right away is just to say that something that's become really noticeable to me, and I'm 40 now. I feel like I'm a little, I have come to understanding this a little late, but authenticity and accessibility are so important today, especially to the generation that is just behind me. And I think that they understand that the most interesting stories are idiosyncratic stories. These stories can become massive. People that are idiosyncratic, people can become massive. They can be economically dominant. But what I'm striving for in my show is an expression of my authentic self, my something I love, which is to talk about, and something I have a strong point of view on, is hearing people's spiritual journeys, being interested in those journeys, and understanding this from a very broad-minded perspective. I ask a single question, which is, how and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life? And so we start a conversation about something that to me has always felt a little bit distant. And what I hope is that the listener follows my joy and enthusiasm for it to connect with the people around me. And so in my business, I'm primarily an actor, but I have to seek those jobs as an auditioner. And what this does is bring me value, self-worth, self-esteem as an artist, someone that can express my innate desires of the way I see the world and want to interact with the world. I can do it during COVID-19. It was an amazing gift to have this sort of be in my infrastructure as we were approaching this. It's allowed me to go down the road that many of us are going down, which is an expansion of knowledge, an expansion of learning, calling up my friends that are Black and really asking them questions that I'd never asked them before. A friend of mine who's a transgender female, asking her, what was your spiritual life like, and how has your journey reflected that in all the different transformations your life has taken? They've been extraordinary conversations, and they're not necessarily easy to just market to the world, but there's something that you build as you build through your authentic self. And then when you get fans that care about you and come to know you, they stay with you in ways that when I'm on a show, people will, like me on my Instagram or my tweets or my, Twitter or, whatever platform I'm trying to connect with them on, but they don't quite know me. But when people come to know you authentically, they will stay with you, and they'll honor that if they feel like they're being treated with respect in return.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And what you say about authenticity, Nicholas, is something that we actually teach students all the time. Actually, students more often teach us about the value and importance of authenticity. Joe Ferullo, I'm wondering in the broadcast business, how are you thinking about the role of podcasts in enhancing and extending the personality of broadcasters and the reach of broadcasters with different audiences?
But it's become a growing and more important role, because podcasts allow stars and broadcasters to show a different side of themselves. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was at CBS, Dr. Phil started his own podcast, and it allowed him to pursue his passion, which was interviewing sports stars. That's not something he could do on his daily talk show, and it was a side of himself he couldn't really show before. So he did this, and it really opened him up to a whole different audience. It made him, I think, a more satisfied person. Anna Ferris, who stars in the sitcom Mom, wanted to do a podcast about relationships, something she has had trouble with in her own life, so she called it Unqualified. And she was able to show a side of her that she couldn't show in a scripted sitcom. So it helps stars grow, which helps every project they work in, and helps the network and studios they work with as well to see different sides of them.
Joe Garner, you built and are building, a significant business on the basis of your storytelling, your books, and now your podcast. And I'm assuming monetizing IP very successfully. How does intellectual property work in the podcast industry, and how should we thinking about unlocking its value for creators specifically?
Well, that's a complex question. And I'll tell you why. Because it's very difficult for a sole proprietor to be out there if your goal is to be successful in monetization. You really need to be part of a larger network. And to be a part of a larger network, and Joe Ferullo might be able to speak to this too, sometimes part of that negotiation is giving up some of your IP. So it's a double-edged sword. And it's something that I'm dealing with myself right now, and taking some of my previous books and adapting them into podcasts. So I waited until those rights reverted solely to me so that I could own them myself. But it's a wonderful thing. There's a reason why every talent agency in this town has a podcast division, because it allows the creators like Nick, who have a passion, to be able to express it and not have to worry about the mind-numbing committees that occupy networks and streaming services and those sorts of things. It's a passion. He can do it, and he can, and he can create IP out of that. And then, depending on how it grows, it gives him a property that then go and sell to a streaming service. No reason why, God and other delicacies couldn't be a video series at some point too. So, or go into publishing. So it's just, it's wonderful for creators because there's no barrier of entry, really, when it comes to podcasting.
So right now, and Joe Ferullo, I know you know this. In news, there's a real debate around intellectual property, and it's also aligned with equity in a lot of ways, where people who have been typically undervalued and have had less access are really fighting for IP rights for podcasts that have been produced at a network on a network job. Is this an area that's ripe for reinvention right now, or ripe for disruption right now? Really thinking through a new model for IP in this area?
Absolutely. And I think part of that comes because anyone can get into it. In other words, the IP thing started because if you wanted to just start up a news show or any kind of TV program, that was a lot of money. So you had to go to the people with the money, and they had to go deep into their pockets and take a chance on you. And in exchange for that risk, they wanted to own what you produced. Podcasts don't have that kind of barrier to entry in terms of cost. So you can see how someone who has a passion, who has an idea for a radio documentary, let's say, for a podcast documentary, can do a very good job on their own, and then present that as an entree into a news organization, into a studio to do it if it was a drama, let's say, and say, look, I've done the hard work. You know what this is. You know what's going to happen here. You know where this can go. Therefore, you don't get to own the IP, or we at least get to share in it, because I've done the hard work on my own. Something that you really can't do if you're doing a big television production. So I think disruption is where that will happen.
Joe, thank you for that. Gentlemen, thank you. We are going to head over to Paul Piazza right now, our music director, for a musical break. Paul, what do you have for us?
Thanks so much, Willow. We've got a fantastic musical guest with us this week. Steve Oliver is a New York-born and Los Angeles-based television actor, movie actor, voiceover artist, and all-around great guy. He's very special to my heart, and he makes music for the community in all sorts of great community spaces. He's going to share with us today his love of the Rat Pack. We've got some tunes by Sinatra for you on tap. Now, he wasn't able to join us live. We had some tech issues, but he and I got together yesterday to record some great music, and we hope that you enjoy it right now. Here is Stephen Oliver with some Sinatra for you. Enjoy.
I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow, got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love. I've got a song that I sing, I can make that rain go anytime I move my finger. Lucky me, can't you see I'm in love? Life is a beautiful thing, as long as I hold the string. I'd be a silly so-and-so if I should ever let it go. Got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow, got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love. Life is a beautiful thing, as long as I hold a string. I'd be a silly so-and-so if I should ever let it go. I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow, got the string around my finger. What a world, man, this is the life. Hey now, I'm so in love.
was great. Everybody needs a little Frank Sinatra in their afternoon. So thank you, Paul, for that. And welcome back to 4 at 4. And welcome back to our panel. We're going to continue the conversation on the financial future of the business. And I'd like to take a closer look at the economics for creators. Jane Wells, as you know from CNBC, is actually shooting in Las Vegas right now. She's reporting in Las Vegas. But before she left, she filed a dispatch for us on the economics, her economics of podcasting. So take a look.
Hi, Willow. Thanks, everybody. I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm going to do something that's a little unusual. We're going to actually be transparent and show you how much it costs to make a podcast. My podcasts are a little different than the other ones here because they're scripted. They require actors and editing and writing and that sort of thing. And the personal project I'm working on right now is one for the holidays called Top Story Tonight, Jesus, in which we take all the tools of modern media and social media, all the information and misinformation, put them in a time machine, transport them back 2,000 years to Bethlehem to cover the story of what has become the world's largest religion. Of course, nobody knows what to make of it. And to give you an idea of what the podcast will sound like, here's a quick tease.
Top story tonight, they're calling it Bethlehem Mayhem.
Shepherds in the remote region south of Jerusalem took to social media overnight with reports of a type of UFO.
Are you seeing this? Hearing this? This angel is speaking.
We have seen a star, and it's been foretold that a child has been born, a king of the Jews.
Fake news. Fake news. I'm not surprised to hear that from you. Your network is very unpopular.
Just give us some room. She's about to have a baby.
Go back to where you belong. We don't need any more babies born here.
You expect us to believe that God is the father of your child?
Yes.
More fake news. I should have you arrested and your head chopped off.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God!
No, and also Mary and Joseph actually do go on the Dr. Phil show, except he's called Dr. Philistine. Okay, how much does something like this cost? I have a quick slideshow to run through the cost for. If you show up the first slide, of course, we're talking about the price of Jesus. Let's go to the second slide, which starts to lay out some of the expenses. I had a cast of 21 people, very talented. The nice thing right now is most actors are at home. And so they have home studios and they're available to work. I had 3 actors, fortunately, who refused to take money from me. So that brought the cost down to $7,400 for the cast. Editing is the big cost, $10,000, but I probably have saved $5,000 there because I learned how to use GarageBand, which I love editing, and GarageBand is free. And I've rough cut the pieces. So I made a lot of decisions that I would have made after initial editing so that the editor now has a much tighter thing. And so she's basically going to do mixing and final edit on that and still deal with more of my changes. Music I got from Video Helper, great website, which has all kinds of music that you license based on the medium and the length. So that's going to cost me $2,500. Sound effects I get from prosoundeffects.com. $5 a sound effect. Oh, I need an angry crowd. Oh, I need sheep bawing in Bethlehem. They have it. I also interview biblical experts. So about a third of the podcast is not scripted. It's interviews, which I've edited down. And the studios, to get them to go to a studio, that was $430. Then I decided to raise some money at the encouragement of others on Kickstarter. So I had to make a Kickstarter video, and editing for that cost me $525. Next slide, more expenses. I'm making my own website. It's easy to do on GoDaddy. And there are YouTube how-to videos for everything. So the domain name, topstorytonightpodcast.com, is about $135. Building the web on GoDaddy, $192. Photoshop, which I only needed for 1 month. You can see Henry VIII there with a microphone in his face for a future season, I hope, $21. Then because on Kickstarter, which I did, you have to offer rewards based on contributions. And one of the rewards was t-shirts. I made those. Those cost me about $193, and the image rights there, you can see for that picture of Jesus is $58. So total expenses, next slide, are under $22,000, which is a lot, but cheaper than when I did this 2 years ago on my own for the Mayflower. So I'm already saving money. Okay, how did I raise funds? I went on Kickstarter as people asked me to. I was looking for $16,700. I managed to raise almost $800 more of that. Of course, after Kickstarter takes its cut, that went down to just over $16,000. And then I had an outside investor offer $3,000. So total funds raised, next slide, just over $19,000. So if we go to the next slide, out-of-pocket expenses for me are under $2,600, about a tenth of what I paid 2 years ago when I did Mayflower all on my own. But if we go to the next slide, still to be determined, final slide, marketing. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I'm willing to spend $5,000 out of my own money to do it. Free media, social media, buy ads on podcasts. A lot of the talent is from KFI, and the KFI program director is offering to let me do 30-second ads in KFI podcasts for free. So that is wonderful. What's the goal? We're launching the Christmas episodes end of November. Easter's in the spring. I'm hoping someone loves it enough that they want to finance future seasons of women's suffrage, Cleopatra breaking the internet, the Alamo, Moses, who knows? But I hope you will tune in and enjoy it. Even if it doesn't make me any money, I have so enjoyed doing this and collaborating. And Kickstarter has turned out to be a great marketing tool because people now know about it long before it actually launches. Willow, back to you.
So much. Kickstarter is a marketing tool. So Nicholas, I wonder as you watch that and look at Jane's fancy back of the envelope, if that brought up memories for you as you plotted out the early investment in your own podcast. And I was also thinking maybe there's a promotional tie-in with Top Story Tonight and God and Other Delicacies.
I love it. Please, if you wouldn't mind being the conduit between myself and Jane Wells. I had a much lower infrastructure, initial investment than that. I would say it was about $1,000 for me to have proper equipment, things like Zoom H6. I think they have an H8 now, but the Zoom H6 is an amazing machine. I'm not going to go in and spend all my time talking about that, but you can look that up. It was only about $350, $325. Mics, some stands, and then also there's a monthly fee on your podcasting hosting site. It depends which one you want to get. I chose Podbean, which has a greater storage capacity for your bandwidth. I went into my initial upload was about 13 episodes. And so, it was a lower infrastructure cost. I mean, to me, to have something that, is less than $1,500 that is so transformed really, truly something that Jane hit on is even if it doesn't make her any money, the joy and the artistic value and the diversification of her skill set is so valuable. It's difficult to put a price on that. And as something that Joe Garner was speaking to, which I appreciated, was we don't quite know where this will go from here. So I love this. I get to create content every week, not entirely knowing yet exactly how I want to use it. But absolutely, I've thought about things like what could it be in a book form? What could it be in a video form? What other ways can I start as I explore this in a relatively low stakes format? How much experience am I gaining and what other ideas can I branch off with from here? And it's a beautiful experience in that regard. And it is very low level investment from my side of it.
So Joe Garner, let's get your advice on, we saw Jane's discovery chart, right? Social media, using Kickstarter to preview for folks, all the way up to sort of paid ad buys. What advice would you have for podcasters who are in this kind of early stage trajectory?
Well, the first thing I always advise people is to be very clear about your why. Why are you doing a podcast? Are you doing a podcast because it's a passion and it's just a creative expression? Is it something that you are passionate about in terms of teaching people? Are you wanting to make money? And regardless of whatever those reasons are, you really have to be clear about it because, podcasting is the great democratizer. Anybody and everybody can do it, and anybody and everybody seems to want to try it. But it's more than just getting a microphone and being able to speak. Most podcasts don't last past the 7th episode because they discover that it takes work. It's such a crowded space now that's the other thing, is that I encourage people to really be soul searching in determining what their differentiator is. Podcasts aren't like radio or television. Those are passive. If somebody's downloading your podcast, this is purposeful, and they want to be entertained, or they want to be enlightened, or, so you really have to, get granular about what it is that you're going to do on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, or what it is. And then when it gets to the monetization, it is about downloads. There's no question about it, but it depends on your audience. If you're doing something niche, it doesn't take a big audience. Mm-hmm. And there'll be advertisers out there. I was talking to a network recently, a small network, and one of their biggest podcasts was a yoga podcast. And first of all, I thought, yoga, you need to see that. But believe it or not, the lifestyle and everything else was very appealing, and they had that thing sold out constantly. And the audience wasn't all that big, but it was a focused audience, and that was a determined audience. And so that made a big difference too. I don't know if I've answered your question specifically, but there's
it's about a focused audience, but it's also about an engaged audience. And so I would assume, thus making it more valuable potentially to the right advertiser. Are you seeing kind of innovations in the advertising space and the sponsorship space in podcasts?
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's about the live read. It goes back, everything old is new again. It goes back to the days of the 1930s and 40s where shows were sponsored by, and the host did the Geritol ad or whatever. That just dated me, didn't it? But that's what advertisers want. And the reason that they want that is because the audience invests a great deal in the host. They establish a real relationship. I would imagine Nick has that with his audience. So they trust. So when Nick does an ad for Daily Harvest or Away Travel or Casper Mattress or something, they believe him, and there's value in that. But the other thing that a lot of networks are doing now is they're doing the live reads, but they're not what's called baked in. They're not going to be there for an indefinite period of time. They now do things like dynamic insertion. They do programmatic, and it's all not to get into the weeds of it, but it's all computerized and very automated. But all the more reason why, if you're really looking for a mass appeal, it's getting more and more difficult to do that independently, and why you need to look at a network. Can I add one last thing, Willow? Because when Nick was talking about what platform to use, there's a lot of platforms out there, but a lot of people, if it's free, they think, oh, that's great, I'll go on SoundCloud or I'll go on Anchor. If you're hoping to monetize, you don't want to go on those sites. You want to look for sites, you want to look for platforms that are IAB compliant, Internet Advertising Bureau compliant, because the numbers, the analytics on the free sites aren't analytics that advertisers will pay attention to. They just know that they're inflated, and so that's why you want to look for an IAB compliant platform.
All right, that's good. That is a serious pro tip. IAB compliant platforms for anybody who's hoping to monetize a podcast. And Joe, who knew that was going to be a segue into our next musical break? So we're now going to toss it back over to Paul Piazza for a little more music. Paul?
Thanks so much, Willow. I told you a little bit earlier, Willow, that Steve Oliver is a person near and dear to my heart. He actually happens to be my stepdad, and I'm so excited to feature him on this program because he just sounds so good and because he does amazing musical things for the community. Wanted to share a short video clip of what he has been doing during this pandemic to make sure that even in a time where public concerts, for the most part, are not available, that music still gets heard. So check this out just for a minute here, and then we'll get to some music.
Does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care?
Now at 11, a little Sunday evening concert in a West Hills neighborhood. During the Safer at Home orders, Steve Oliver is keeping his neighbors entertained from his front yard. The furloughed waiter and part-time performer typically belts out tunes by Frank Sinatra, Bobby Darin, and Elvis Presley. Everyone makes sure to listen from a safe distance. Oliver says it's gratifying to connect with people and make them smile.
Not exactly Saturday in the park. It's like Sunday on the cul-de-sac, I guess we can go with that one. American.
That's great. Oh, makes me want to.
Up a lazy river by the old mill run, lazy river in the noonday sun. Linger a while in the shade of a tree. Throw away your troubles, dream with me. Up a lazy river where the robin's song wakes the morning, we'll roll along. There be blue skies above, everyone's in love. Up a lazy river, how happy we'll be. Up a lazy river with me. Up a lazy river by the old mill run. On a lazy, lazy river in the noonday sun. You can linger for a while in the shade of a tree. Throw away your troubles, baby, dream a dream with me. Up a lazy river where the robin's song wakes a bright new morning, where we can roll along. There may be gray skies up above, but as long as we're in love, we'll be up a lazy river. How happy we could be. Up a lazy river with me. From the halfway mark, yeah, up a lazy river where the robin's song awakes a bright new morning. We can roll along. There are blue skies up above, and as long as we're in love, we'll be up a lazy river. Up a crazy lazy river. Up a lazy river. I ain't going your way. Get out of my way. Up a lazy river with me.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm hoping Mr. Oliver does house calls and we'll come to a concert in my neighborhood and we can get the lawn chairs out. That was fantastic. Gentlemen, welcome back. I want to follow up, if I can, on Joe Garner's conversation about the economics at what I'll call the micro level, to Joe Ferullo ask you about what I'll call the macro level, the economics of podcasts in the media business. Where are they right now in their trajectory to being significant financial contributors to the big players in the space?
They're on a pretty high trajectory, and it depends on what you mean by contributors, right? So on the one hand, you have big audio companies like Entercom and iHeart, who are investing a lot of money in podcast stars. Entercom just paid a handsome salary, I'm not sure what it is, to Malcolm Gladwell to do a podcast for them. So that's one area where obviously podcasting is entering the big time with big media companies. The other way is what we were talking about in terms of podcasts becoming almost pilots for TV series and movies. And that's because you can better judge what you've got through a podcast. So Dear John started out as a nonfiction podcast on the LA Times and became a series on TNT. Homecoming was a scripted podcast and is now on Amazon Prime. And that's because those podcasts did a lot of the work that a very long and arduous development process does for studios, which is it showed me as an executive what the story is. It showed me more than that, what are the atmospherics? What's the tone? Do all those things work? A successful podcast gives that to me and says, here's a nice package, and makes it easier for me to say, let's greenlight that and turn that into something for a different medium.
Right. So all the things that would be in your pitch deck are already delivered nicely.
Already right there.
Along with some brand recognition.
Exactly.
So you and I were talking earlier, and Spotify did a deal with Peter Chernin and his entertainment company to take podcast material and potentially turn it into film and television. So it sounds like you expect that we're going to see more of those kind of cross-media relationships.
Absolutely, because as people get more and more used to it, as you know, there are early adopters, and then everyone else kind of comes along and says, fine, me too. But Homecoming is a great example. Homecoming was a very successful podcast, scripted, beautifully atmospheric, and was so good that they got Julia Roberts to do a television show for Amazon Prime, and then Janelle Monáe to do the second season. That's a huge success for any studio and a huge success for any writer. And the podcast and successful execution of that podcast allowed that to happen.
Speaking of Spotify, at Annenberg, we have relationships with both Spotify and Luminary, because both of those companies have identified real talent needs as they grow those businesses. Luminary in particular funded a fellowship to increase capacity in public radio broadcasts and podcasts, because they felt that it was important to contribute to public radio production, as well as commercial radio production of podcasts. I'm wondering what you all are seeing, and or what advice you would give to young people thinking about going into this business. And Joe Garner, maybe I'll start with you. Where are you seeing a talent need in your universe? Either way.
I don't think that there's a specific talent need. I think that genres are, they're pretty robust. Pick one. I mean, at the top of the heap is true crime. That's why Dick Wolf has now created a podcast division. Chandra Rhimes also has podcasting as part of her enterprise now. So as far as any young person looking to get into it, do it. Try it out, but make sure that it's really something you want to do, because it does take work, and also be real clear about why you're doing it. It's as we've talked about before, it can just be a great creative expression, and who knows where it'll lead. And oftentimes those are some of the most successful, whatever the creative, if it's a movie or it's a television show, or if it comes from a place of genuine passion, usually the money follows. So I just say dive in, have fun with it, try different things, experiment, collaborate. People, one of the biggest challenges is discoverability, and people think, well, I'll do social media, but the truth is social media is not as effective in promoting podcasts as one might think. It's kind of like having a billboard on the 101.
So why
it's really audio that converts audio. Pardon?
Why do you find social media doesn't work for promoting podcasts? It's too math?
Well, when you think about the experience of social media, it's like I started to say, it's like putting a billboard on the freeway. You can see that there's maybe something happening, but as somebody is going through to look at, their friends' photos or, different posts and things like that, rarely do they hit that link and go to a podcast. The best way to do it is typically by having relationships with other podcasters. I'm talking about, young people that are building. Look at other people that have audiences that you'd want, and reach out to them and develop a relationship with them, and reciprocate. You be on my show, I'll be on your show, or buy the advertising. That's the most effective way. It's audio that converts to audio. That's what I've found.
Nick, what about you? Nicholas, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think Joe said a lot of what I would say. I think that I agree. I have a modest but recognizable, substantial to some extent number of social media followers on some of my platforms. And it does convert at times to a small percentage of listeners. But, obviously bigger stars, when I've had friends on that have large social media followers as well, that outreach is important. But it doesn't necessarily translate to long-term listening. I think that it's a world that requires patience. And as Joe talks about, it's something that requires an enormous amount of desire and personal and value, a great deal of personal value that you get from your own work. For me, I look forward to my conversation every week. I look forward to 7 to 8 hours of editing every week, even though it's difficult to find that time with my young child during COVID, but I find it because I love it. And then from there, it has been deeply rewarding for me to have direct contact with my listeners, people that do email, as Joe was referencing. So I think that the wins are kind of small, specifically for me at an early stage, but they are so genuine and sincere that it has a meaning just beyond the raw numbers. And then, yeah, I'm encouraged by looking at people like Joe Rogan, who took 2 years. He talks about it took him 2 years to kind of branch out. I see people that launched all different kinds of, whether it's sports related or music related or art related. Things take 2, 3, 4 years for them to find the audience that becomes that critical mass. So stick with it and find the thing that you love, and don't be afraid of being the artistic self that you truly are.
Thank you. Joe Ferullo, I'm coming to you with a tougher question about the industry overall. We know that inclusion is an issue in the media business. We know it's an inclusion, and inclusion is an issue in movies, television, music industry, even arts criticism. What can we do now as this podcasting business is building and growing quickly to ensure that it offers access to all, and we're really fostering a diverse talent population?
What we have to do, Willow, is take advantage of this moment, because you're right. It's building now, and it's building quickly, but it's building. In other words, nothing is set in its ways. There's no one to say, oh no, we can't do that, or that kind of voice won't work here. So you can take chances. You can take risks right now. You can bring diverse voices in, because no one's going to tell you really not to do it. In television, in the movies, there's a lot of rules, and the rules are being broken right now. But that's a lot of work to break those rules down, right? And break those doors down. You don't have those walls built yet in podcasting. So it's really up to the people who are the gatekeepers to say, this is the moment to bring in new voices.
And so who are those gatekeepers that we may need to hold accountable for this?
Well, listen, I think it's to some extent the studios who are getting involved in the podcasting business, and to a large extent news organizations. News organizations are playing a very big role, NPR primarily among them, but all the news networks, in expanding into podcasting. And if they want to find a place to train younger, diverse people who they want to bring in, that's the place to do it. If you want to find a place to bring diverse voices in that don't require the mass audience of a nightly newscast, that's the place to do it. And really take your measure of these people and give them the opportunity to show you who they are.
We saw recently that the DJ Charlemagne is creating something called the Black Effect Podcast Network. Do you expect we're going to see more of these kinds of deals and more of these kinds of creations?
Yes, there are several of these sort of targeted networks going on. One that I like especially is called Radio Public. It is free for a lot of people to go to it. They offer tools for podcasters. There's an incredibly diverse lineup of voices there. And there are several others like it as well. But those are great places for people to start to find homes.
I have a final question for you, because it's time to wrap. It's a political question. During a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, he pitched the idea to have him host a presidential debate between Donald Trump and Vice President Biden. Will we see a debate on podcast?
Well, I think Jerry Springer should do the next debate. He should be the moderator. That's my. But it would. But listen, quickly. I mean, I think it would help. I think it would help for at least one member of the duo debating to realize that his face is not on camera constantly. It might calm things down.
Gentlemen, thank you.
I just think that it lends itself to an intimacy. If you can format a situation where all people adhere to the rules of that intimacy is one thing, because you wouldn't want to. The fear of editing, I think, for the fans in that regard would be difficult. I think one of the reasons is that seeing something live, you're not fearing that your candidate is being, manipulated in some sense. So, Joe Rogan runs his show with a live feed also on video. So I'm not sure he would totally dance around that subject, but just to let you know, like, there would still be those bars. I love the intimacy aspect of it, though.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And just hearing people's voices brings you another dimension of them as human beings, which would be really interesting. Thank you, Joe Garner, Joe Ferullo, Nicholas D'Augusto. Fantastic conversation with you all today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Willow.
Thank you, Willow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much for coming in on today's show. Willow, this was a fantastic conversation, so much great material. I just wanted to let the people know at home that if you want to find out more about 4 at 4 Forums programming, please visit our website, PeopleMedia.Live. You can also see our Facebook page, facebook.com/4at4forums. You could also use the website or our Facebook page to send us a message with any comments about the show. If you want to recommend a musician or a local band that you want to see featured on the show, or if you might even want to book one of the amazing musical artists that we've heard so far for your very own live digital event. So reach out to us through the website. We hope to hear your voices, and we're so glad everyone enjoyed today's show. In a moment, we're going to bring everybody back up for just a final wave goodbye, and then we're going to let Steve Oliver play us out, as they say in the broadcasting business. So can we get everybody up for one last wave goodbye? And then we've got Steve and Oliver here on the horizon with Fly Me to the Moon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye, Paul.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song, let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words,